nerve-wracking 44-41 win against UNLV in overtime, Syracuse is riding high into Raleigh, North Carolina. The NC State Wolfpack await them as SU heads into ACC play once again. Can the Orange keep the momentum rolling with a fierce offensive attack led by the battery of Cal McCord and LeQuint Allen? Or do the Wolfpack have something to say about it? Our analysts are here to break it all down. It's another edition of Cuse Countdown, and it starts right now. Welcome inside our CitrusTV studios for another edition of Cuse Countdown. Alongside Nick Waley and Tyler Aitken, I'm Srikar Rajendran. This time, it's Syracuse taking on NC State, but it comes off the heels of a huge 44-41 dub against UNLV in overtime. The second-ranked win of the Fran Brown era, and the head coach had quite a bit to say about the mentality in practice and how it translates to the on-field product.
We believe that we bleed in training, so you don't have to truly bleed in war. And I learned that from Kirby Smart, and when I was at Georgia, and just bleed in training. We bleed in training so we don't bleed in war. And we work really hard in practice so you wouldn't flinch to something in the game because you practice all week for the game.
Bleed in training so you don't bleed in wartime. I mean, what a quote there, Nick.
Oh my God.
And do you think the team reflected that on Saturday? I mean, that was a gritty, physical win, came down to the wire. What'd you think?
That is exactly what this Syracuse team really needed after what was a really disappointing couple weeks. Beating up on Holy Cross is not really the telling story. Beating a number 25 team in the country is much bigger than that. It's the first time since 2001 that a Syracuse team has had two top 25 wins. And the way it happened, first overtime win since 2021, Syracuse looked like the team that had the guts and that was able to get over the line and get that major win.
Yeah, what Syracuse proved in this game, Nick, is that even though it passed the ball 63 times, the Orange can win on the back of the run game. 4 touchdowns from running back LeQuint Allen. That's a career high. And at the end of the game, on a key 4th down in 4th quarter and in overtime, LeQuint Allen got the ball. It showed trust in him for the first time in the Fran Brown era. And now Syracuse has proven going forward that it can trust the run game and the running backs.
Yeah, of course. And you look at the discrepancy in the pass yards, but you mentioned it, Tyler. That run game was a big reason that SU ultimately squeaked out with a win in Vegas. I mean, LeQuint Allen, 130 total yards and 4 scores, and even freshman running back Yasin Willis had nearly 8 yards a carry. Tyler, when that run game is going, that offense is going.
It's going, and it's going. Syracuse has been absolutely phenomenal when it runs the ball, and that's really only just in this game against UNLV. But with LeQuint Allen, yes, he proved he can run the ball. He also proved he can be involved in the pass game. He had 9 catches, that was second on the team, for 60 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Allen has almost 6 receptions per game. That's the second most by any running back in the entire country. So yes, the running game works, but also the running backs can get involved in whatever the offense is doing.
I mean, the fact that LeQuint is a receiving back. He's very, very good at receiving it out of the pocket and able to make those quick darting runs. I mean, that toss from McCord was just beautiful. And it's because Allen can get into those positions. But I think the fact that Yasin Willis now is able to be that typical running back, able to just run the ball, just run it in towards the secondary. Had a couple really big plays against UNLV. I was really impressed of the performances he's been able to put up recently.
Well, fellas, let's use our memories real quick and go back to week 3 against Stanford. LeQuint Allen actually put up a dud, and then 2 productive games against Holy Cross and now against UNLV. Another player that's seen a resurgence here, Oronde Gadsden. I mean, 142 yards on 10 catches. If we really do the math, that is a lot of chunk plays. McCord was finding him early and often. Nick, do you think this is a sign of things to come for Oronde Gadsden, or is it more of a one-off?
Well, for the sake of Oronde Gadsden and the Syracuse Orange, I would hope so. I mean, but he's been that guy. He's been the guy transitioning from the Dino Babers era and has been able to transition into the Fran Brown era fairly seamlessly, I feel like. And I think the fact that he's got that quarterback behind him, and finally, because this Syracuse offense has been so so efficient and so multi-dimensional, it's meant that now finally Gadsden is no longer that primary target. He's not in triple coverage every single play anymore because you've got players like Pena, like Allen, who are now very, very good options for the Syracuse offense. And I've been really impressed that in the way that Gadsden's just been able to just keep putting on the pressure.
I mean, he really didn't do anything wrong in those two games where he didn't perform all that well. He just wasn't getting the ball passed to him. His two lowest targets totals of the season was against Holy Cross and Stanford when he only got 5 and 7 targets respectively. When he is getting looks, he is producing. So all McCord has to do is look at him. I know you said, he's not the number one target every game. He should be. He is a tight end that is athletic in the slot. When he gets the ball, he does well with it. So he should be that first look.
There's a whole lot to be jubilant about. I mean, 2 straight wins. I get it. Holy Cross. But UNLV, another big win. One big negative, though. The special teams, from blocked field goals to botched punts. I mean, this is not what SU expected from this special teams unit. Am I right, Tyler?
Srikar, you're absolutely right. The special teams units have been atrocious the past few weeks. It started with Stanford, but the kicking unit against Holy Cross, blunder after blunder.
They missed a total of 3 out of 3 field goals on there. Let's take a look at what happened against the Crusaders. Brady Denenberg, who's played in 16 straight games for the Orange, first has his kick blocked. Let's say Demetrius Weatherspoon did not hold himself in much glory, was not able to block Colin Reynolds there, who got the fingertip to the kick. And then Denenberg had another opportunity later on in the quarter to at least get Cuse up at least a score, and just completely shanked it wide left. That meant Jaden O then got a chance at a kick, did hit the pipe on that occasion, but then hit a field goal against UNLV.
Still just 1 for 4 over the last 2 weeks. In that game against UNLV, it was the punt unit that looked even uglier. 2 botched punts, and one of them was returned for a touchdown in a critical moment. Let's take a look. 4 Rebels defenders get through, block the punt, return it for a touchdown. That tied the game late in the third quarter, made it 31-31 going into the fourth. And it was 2 star players for Syracuse, Justin Barron right here and Aronde Gadsden all the way back here, that let Ricky White right through. He should not be that wide open on that block. Gets his hands on the football, it's recovered for a touchdown, and those are game-changing plays. This game shouldn't have gone into overtime, but it did because of many special teams issues, and that one, you just saw the scheme and the communication were not there. Srikar, it's been a huge problem. It needs to get fixed.
Well, fellas, you explained it perfectly, and beyond looking at the specific examples with the plays, I think the stats surely back it up. Bottom 4 in special teams ranking so far this year. Bottom 2 in special teams position efficiency. A lot of bottoms here. Bottom 3 in kickoff return efficiency. Bottom 5 in punt efficiency. Bottom. It is not looking very good for this special teams unit, and I'm sure they are going to be looking for a turnaround, hopefully in this game against NC State. But a big takeaway from that win over UNLV, going back into the past a little bit more, was the leadership. Fran Brown knows exactly what he wants out of his leaders and what he expects from them, and he said it in a press conference. Let's take a listen.
Kyle's a great leader. Our guys love him, and him and Fidel. I told those guys before the game, and I wrote on the board, if Fidel Diggs and Kyle McCord play big, we'll win the game. Said it won't be great, but we'll win the game. As long as Fidel Diggs and Kyle McCord play big, we'll win the game because those guys are leaders.
So Brown lists Kyle McCord and Fidel Diggs as 2 guys that really stand out as leaders. And Tyler, it must say a lot about those 2, first of all, that Fran Brown can literally say that the game rides on those 2 alone.
It does ride on those 2 alone, and it did ride on those 2 alone, but you got to give a lot of credit to Kyle McCord, who threw 63 passes against UNLV. But when coach said, hey, we're going to run it with LaQuint Allen at the end of this game for the game-winning score, and he had no problems just handing that ball off, that's leadership, that's humility, to know that you were getting it done all game long and you're still going to give the ball up because it's what's best for the team.
Well, for me, though, we've known the offense has been good and Kyle McCord has been sensational all year long, but I got to give it to the defense. The defense was the big question mark, especially over the first 3 games. I think Fidel Diggs made that huge stop in overtime to force the field goal against UNLV. Syracuse wouldn't have been in a position to win if it wasn't for Fidel Diggs. I think the fact that he's been able to take over that role, been able to step up in the absence of Marlo Wax, they're really impressed with what he's been able to do.
Well, I guess this game against NC State will be a true test in that regard to see whether that theory for Fran Brown holds true. But when we come back, NC State is on the docket. We've been doing a whole lot of Cuse talk. NC State, an interesting squad. We're going to break it all down when we come back on The Countdown. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown alongside Nick Waley and Tyler Aitken. I'm Srikar Rajendran. Now, NC State expectations don't always meet reality. That's certainly been the case for the Wolfpack. Came into the year with a fair bit of hype, and now sitting at 3-3. Nick, are you disappointed at all? What's going on here?
I think disappointment might even be an understatement with this NC
Wow.
State team coming off of a really, really solid year, but start of the year, yes, their strength of schedule has been a little bit strong, but this is a team that you expected to be up there contending for the ACC. I mean, the ACC has been almost a complete wash. It's been so unpredictable this year. But they were ranked 24th in the first AP poll, had 8 first place votes in the ACC to start the preseason. But this is an NC State team that has continued to disappoint over the last decade or so. Haven't made an ACC championship game since 2005. And that, to me, is a big overarching story for this NC State team.
I don't know why you're surprised. I don't know why you had these expectations for this team.
Why not?
They've had 2 losses to 2 phenomenal teams in Tennessee and Clemson. Remember, coming into this year, NC State lost its starting quarterback in Brennan Armstrong, who was also the leading rusher on this team last year. 4 out of the 5 top receivers on the Wolfpack team last year are gone. Top tackler Peyton Wilson got drafted by the Steelers. Second leading tackler Jalen Scott graduated. Nobody is back on this team other than KJ Concepcion. I don't know how you expected this team to compete for an ACC title when they lost everybody from last year's team.
But at the same time, you look at the games that they have played against Louisiana Tech and Wake Forest just last week, a team that everyone thought that Wake would be towards the bottom of the ACC.
The team that you thought would be towards the bottom of the ACC. Don't let me into that. Don't let me into that.
Fellas, all I've learned from this is that maybe no expectations were the right move here, but the man in charge, all right, Dave Doran, head coach, second longest tenure in the ACC. So he's been with the Wolfpack for quite a while. A little bit consistent too. You look at 8 wins in 6 of the last 7 seasons, but he hasn't won a bowl game since 2017. Now, Tyler, is this a smoke and mirrors situation, or is Doran potentially the real deal?
He's experienced, he's consistent, he's a nice veteran presence in that locker room. But the issue is the recruiting hasn't modernized to the transfer portal. Listen, Dave Doran hasn't had a top 25 class from high school recruits ever at NC State. And so he's been trying to rely on the transfer portal class, a top 20 class from the transfer portal this offseason. But keep in mind, you cannot rely on transfers to build an entire team in one offseason. You're taking a lot of risks. It can work, it can crumble, and clearly the transfer portal is crumbling for the Wolfpack. Remember, their top name, Grayson McCall, could be out for the rest of this season. That's the risk you take when you focus on the transfer portal rather than the high school recruits.
I think at the same time as well, the fact that they are in North Carolina, a breeding ground for some amazing talent, and I think just overall as well, I think the fact that it's not that they haven't won a bowl game since 2017. They've lost 4 straight. I mean, that's pretty telling if you ask me, just looking at previous schedules. I think this is a team that's still sort of just in the middle ground. We talked about that, but Sweeney about not being able to transition to the portal era. I think this is a similar story.
It's the 2 longest tenured coaches in the conference. I'm not shocked that old dogs can't learn new tricks.
Well, here's the thing. It's certainly not the prettiest season for NC State. We've harped on it quite a bit. Their QB, their transfer QB, Grayson McCall, goes down with a concussion due to a very scary looking hit. Doran actually noted that it was the scariest moment he's had as a coach. But freshman CJ Bailey steps in. Nick, good, bad? What's your evaluation here?
I think it's also a little bit too early to tell for CJ Bailey. I mean, this is a guy who's just been thrown into the deep end so quickly. He has some weapons, but it's a defense that is a lot worse than it was last season. You mentioned all the departees in between this season and last. I mean, CJ Bailey hasn't been the worst. He ranks 4th to last in the ACC in quarterback efficiency, last in ACC for yards per game, but of course he has played some pretty good opponents in that time. But I think it's still a little bit too early to tell if he is that future guy, but there's also a little bit now at this point in the season for the Wolfpack, a little bit of a rebuilding year. It's a good chance for CJ Bailey to sort of develop as QB1.
I mean, he's accurate. 65% completion rate is solid, but he just makes every once in a while those rookie mistakes. There's a reason he has 4 touchdowns in just 3 interceptions through the air this year. He does have 2 rushing touchdowns, but don't get confused. His longest rush is 12 yards. He's not a threat on the ground like Georgia Tech's Haynes King or UNLV's Hajj-Malik Williams. So he's going to be a pretty one-dimensional quarterback for the Syracuse defense to stop. I feel like the Orange D is going to be licking its chops headed into this matchup.
Very interesting choice of words there, Tyler, but it certainly helps when your QB has a good supporting cast. And luckily for CJ Bailey, he's got his tight end, Justin Joly, and Concepcion at receiver as well. You know, you look at these two guys, when you talk about the cream of the crop of the ACC in tight ends, Justin Joly and Aronde Gazin on the other side come to mind, the top two receiving tight ends in the conference. Tyler, how do you think that this SU defense will fare, against two really top-notch receiving threats here?
Well, Justin Joly might be in a lot of trouble because you mentioned the comparison with Gadsden. So Syracuse has to go against an elite tight end like that pretty much every single day in practice. So listen, Joly's good, top 10 tight end in the country when it comes to total yards. But KJ Concepcion, this is a big game for him. He needs to step up. Listen, 266 yards is solid, but he's coming off a year where he was a freshman All-American, set pretty much every receiving rookie record for the Wolfpack's program history. He needs to step up and be that veteran leader. I know he's only a sophomore, but when you have a freshman in CJ Bailey as a quarterback against a really solid Syracuse defense, you need a safety valve. You need someone you can look to on every single play. Concepcion has been solid. He needs to be an elite check down option.
I think Justin Joly as well, will be the center point. He's going to get thrown to a lot more often. 20 receptions on the year for 313 yards as well. Second in the ACC, like you mentioned, behind Gadsden. Also 15 yards per carry. I mean, when he gets the ball, he does take it a pretty good distance. So it's going to be a really interesting battle. I'm really excited for that 1v1 tight end battle. Both so dynamic, both for Gadsden and Joly as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we've talked a great deal about that NC State offense, but we did it for a reason. Because the defense, not so great. Bottom 4 in rushing and passing yards per game in the ACC. Nick, we just talked about that Orange offense. How are they going to exploit this matchup? Because it really does seem like a mismatch on paper.
Well, you were saying bottom, and bottom again. This is the same story with this NC State defense. They have one of the worst scoring defenses in the entire country. They're ranked 128th out of all FBS schools. I think this is a defense, like you mentioned, has lost a lot of talent, but they've just been really struggling. Bottom 4 in rushing and passing yards allowed per game in the ACC. They do have still some talent though. Caden Fordman and Sean Brown, who was on the preseason watch list for the Wolfpack this season in the ACC. They do have talent, but just for whatever reason, there's just too many holes in the defense. I think we just got to see if that can continue to develop over time. But in the current state, Yikes, it's still not looking good.
Yeah, here's the thing. Syracuse runs an RPO offense, a run-pass option offense. So the defense has some say in what happens here. The defense should be begging Syracuse to run because the Orange, even though they had a solid running game against UNLV, it wasn't great. The Wolfpack's only chance is to plead and beg Syracuse, run the football, take it out of Kyle McCord's hands because he would absolutely destroy them. And I do not say that lightly. It would get ugly quick if they don't force the run.
Well, it all makes for an interesting matchup, all in all. Fellas, I'm getting kind of tired of breaking things down at the desk. Let's head to the kitchen, where we are going to be cooking up what Syracuse needs moving forward. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Yeah, I knew something smelled good in here. We're in the kitchen. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown alongside Nick Waley and Tyler Aitken. I'm Srikar Rajendran. Now, fellas, I know both of you guys can cook to a certain degree, and I'm going to need you to do it with Syracuse football here. I'm going to give you a few position groups, and you tell me what ingredient, recipe, food does this position group need to go consistent and better moving forward. Starting off with the offensive line, pretty sloppy play of late, a lot of penalties, not too many clean pockets for Cal McCord. It's been a little wishy-washy. Nick, what is one thing you would add to this offensive line?
I think they need to go over to Dunkin' Donuts and grab an espresso shot. They just need to wake up. It's time to get to the nitty-gritty. It's time to get into ACC play. And this is, yes, against UNLV. The offensive line looked the best it did all season long. No sacks for Kyle McCord. But in the previous 2 games, they had 7 in total against Holy Cross and Stanford. I need to see a little bit more energy, and especially going into ACC play.
Well, Nick, I'm not going with food. I'm not going with water. I'm not going with anything. I just want a napkin for this offensive line because they need to clean up. Over the entire season, Syracuse has picked up 31 penalties, 12 of them. 40% have been on just 5 players. The offensive line, these penalties are of pretty much every variety. Holding, false start, illegal men downfield, illegal blocks, multiple penalties in 4 straight games. This offensive line needs to trade in a yellow handkerchief for a white napkin.
Well, let's go from one side of the trenches to the other side of the trenches. The D-line this time. Tyler, you mentioned napkins to clean things up. Do you think you could say the same about the D-line? Is there stuff to clean up there?
No. I want this D-line to get as messy as humanly possible. I'm giving s'mores to the defensive line for 2 main reasons. 1, they need to set up camp in the trenches and actually play physical down there. And 2, let's get some s'mores, marshmallow, sticky fingers on this defensive line. Out of the top 9 tacklers on this orange defense, 6 are defensive backs, 2 are linebackers, and just 1, Fadil Diggs, a defensive end, is a part of that line unit. Everybody else needs to be getting involved. There is no way that Dennis Jacquez Jr. should only be the 10th leading tackler on this defense. The trenches need to be a lot better.
Look, I think that these guys need to just double the protein powder that they're taking every week. They just gotta beef up, go get ready. Like I mentioned, for the O-line, same thing for ACC play. Just need to get ready for it. I mean, the D-line is what can set the good teams and the great teams apart. Got to be ready to go. This Pitt team, number 22 Pitt team, right after NC State, looked like they could be a real challenge for the Orange. So I need to see this D-line really get ready for it.
Well, last but not least here, the big kahuna, the coaching. Going from Fran Brown, a head coach, trickling down to coordinators Jeff Nixon and Elijah Robinson. Nick, I'll start with you. What is one thing that this SU staff needs?
Now, don't laugh at me. I know.
I won't laugh. I'm not here to judge.
They need to have some tea time. To go sit down, have some cake, have some nice cup of tea. I could even provide it. Look, I think everyone just needs to get back on the same page. A few too many times over the last few weeks that just, whether that's Elijah Robinson calling bad plays on defense, Fran Brown mistakes on defense as well. I mean, even James Valona for special teams. I feel like we've already mentioned how what a disaster the special teams have been. I think just need to calm down, get everything back to the way it was and where it should be, especially going into conference play.
Nick, I think you need to get your caffeine addiction under hold. You're talking about going to Dunkin' Donuts. You want a shot of espresso. You want some tea time. It's a little bit too much. I'm going to keep it much simpler, as the coaching staff should. I'm going with a bowl of plain Cheerios with no milk. As simple as possible, because that's what this coaching staff needs to do. Run the darn ball. That's the only thing that this coaching staff should be doing going into this week against a defense that struggles against the run. Things have gotten a little cute at times, especially on special teams. But when it comes to the offense, 63 passes? What are you doing? Getting way too cute with this RPO stuff. Run the ball. LaQuint Allen, Yasin Willis, I don't care who gets it. Run it. Keep it simple. Plain Cheerios, no milk. It works every single time. It's not pretty, but it's effective.
Hey, you know what? Proud of you guys. You guys can cook for me anytime you want. Love that. When we come back, I mentioned time, still some of it left on the countdown. We're going to be going over SU's upcoming schedule, what's going on around the conference, and our keys for the game. Stay tuned.
Welcome to my house. Lately, not my happy place. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The parents were not themselves. My little brothers were morphing into small creatures. The walls were closing in. Clearly a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. And there's a lot of that going around right now. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It might not get you out of the house, but it could help you find a little more breathing room.
Back to the desk. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. Alongside Nick, Waley, and Tyler Aitken, I'm Srikar Rajendran. Now, in the home stretch here, but looking ahead and big picture at SU's upcoming schedule. First, a week of rest. But then you go to Pittsburgh to take on a very solid Panther squad, and you are entrenched in ACC play after that. Nick, anything of note as you look down the stretch here?
I mean, I'm just looking at number one, that number 22 Pitt team looking solid as ever. Then a Boston College team that was ranked. Virginia Tech team that also nearly beat UMiami. Probably should have beat them if it weren't for the refereeing decisions at the end. I mean, and then of course, going all the way to the West Coast for Cal. I mean, we've already seen them nearly upset UMiami then. We can see how good they are in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, though I'm looking at this, and I had thought NC State would probably be the toughest game in this stretch. Now looking at this screen, I think all four of these games are going to be even harder than the matchup against the Wolfpack coming up this weekend. So NC State has somewhat become a must-win because the Wolfpack are an easier opponent than all four of these teams. Somehow, some way, the ACC has been truly bizarre this year.
And the ACC is really important because there are a lot of teams in the ACC that Syracuse has yet to play. And we look at the top dogs in the conference, Clemson and Miami. Clemson 3-0 in the conference. Miami at a stunning 6-0. I mean, Tyler, how does SU play into these standings as of right now?
SU needs to ignore these standings for right now and just focus on winning some games because, listen, the Orange don't control their own destiny right now. There's too many undefeated teams to think about getting to the ACC title game. I sound like a coach right now with all this coach speak, but focus on the game in front of you and then maybe start thinking about the standings when Syracuse takes on Miami November 30th.
Yeah, all I'll say is Miami, they've looked beatable. We'll see if that can happen on the last day of the season.
All right, before we head out, got to give our keys for this one. I'll start with you, Nick. What does SU have to do to get a win in Raleigh?
They need to balance the attack. We can see what McCord can do, and we've talked about him endlessly, how amazing he has been. But we have to talk about the running backs and how the run game has actually been able to develop. We saw it against UNLV. LaQuint Allen put on a show, 4 touchdowns. Willis was great out of the backfield. We need to see that more against this NC State, especially this NC State defense, which has looked very weak and very vulnerable. I think we need to see a balanced SU attack.
Well, there's absolutely just one thing that could result in a Wolfpack win this weekend, and that's causing turnovers. Kyle McCord needs to play a clean game, not throw any interceptions, no fumbles from the Syracuse team this week, and as long as the Orange can do that, it should be pretty smooth sailing.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game for sure. Syracuse and NC State going at it in Raleigh, North Carolina. Should be a fun one. We all had a good time breaking that down, especially up at the wall in the Cuse Countdown kitchen.
I'm so hungry now. It's unbelievable.
No, it's made me hungry as well. Thank you for watching the show. For Tyler, Nick, and I, we want to say thank you, and we hope you enjoy the game.